some presidents, some of the things that happened before leading up to the War of 1812. All right. Everybody knows the first president was George Washington. Who was the second president? He was on the Continental Congress. Adams, John Adams. Okay, who's the third president? He has a big home in Virginia. Thomas Jefferson. Now, who would be the president during the War of 1812? And someone in this room has on their shirt the name of the town. How about James Madison? Madison football. Yeah. Didn't even catch on, did you? Okay, did anybody know his wife's name? Everybody heard of Dolly Madison? Think of the cookies, food, Dolly Madison. Well, it's not the same thing, but it's the same name. So remember that. Dolly Madison, James Madison. James Madison was from Virginia too. He has a big home there. If you ever get a chance, go and see it. All right. We're going to go and talk about Thomas Jefferson. He spoke very highly during the Revolutionary War. If it didn't work out, he was going to be considered a treason, could have been killed. Well, he did become president. Okay, so now, leading up that time, we got our independence from the British, and we're trading with the French, so that's kind of helping us. And we are trading and everything. Well, we are also getting more land at the time. We're starting to move farther west. Through history, you're going to see through the west, we're going to keep on moving farther west. So who was the two famous people that Thomas Jefferson asked to continue to go west and survey the area as far as they can? Lewis and Clark. There's a local tie of Lewis and Clark in this area because eventually they moved. So where did they start at? What would be the farthest west at the time? So just think, what's west of Ohio? Indiana, okay. Then what's connects to Indiana? Okay, then drop south. Not that far south. Where's the St. Louis?
Missouri.
All right, St. Louis. So that's their starting point. So this whole area was still run by settlers and Indians. But when they started in St. Louis, Missouri. Now, how far did they go? How far west did they go, guys?
California.
A little bit north. A little bit north. Washington State, Portland, Oregon. They were going out there. Okay, so Lewis and Clark leaves. They get an Indian agent or an Indian that helped them on their guide. Does anybody know the name of the Indian? Sacagawea. All right, so now they're moving west. And they got flat boats, and now they're going to have to go through the plains, go over mountains. But remember, when they were going out west, they don't know what's out there. To them, they could be fall off the other side of the earth. They don't know. I hope not. But they keep on going there. So through their whole time of going west, they are collecting animals from that west, flowers from out west. They also, when they're going through Kentucky to get to St. Louis, they actually find dinosaur bones. They're still here, the dinosaur bone, at Salt Lick. So they eventually move west, farther west. Any stream, river, anything they have to cross, they get to name it. So if you get a chance to look this up, watch their trail all the way from St. Louis all the way to the Pacific. So now, say they get all the way to the Pacific, and they come back. Thomas Jefferson invites them to come to his house, and they bring him a dinosaur bone. Who would have thought that? I mean, they've been extinct for years. But that was so extravagant that out west, where Indians and Mexicans and they all live out there, and there's people who don't even live out there, and you can still find bones out there of that. So that's pretty interesting. That shows you how the rule of the area was at the time. All right. Has anybody been to Thomas Jefferson's home in Virginia? No. If you ever get a chance, go there. All right. Okay, the War of 1812. Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois was all considered the Northwest Territory. So we started becoming a state. So now we are in this area, got our statehood, and we are trying to make it do in this area. At one time, Ohio had so many trees from the Ohio River to Lake Erie that you could walk on top of each tree, and without touching the ground you could walk. That's how many trees were in this state. There were swamp lands up in the northern part of the state. Eventually, later through history, they dammed them up for they can have gardening and farming area up there. Right? It's a very pretty area of flat land, so they can grow quite a bit. Okay, so now we're getting to the War of 1812. We're doing good, but some things starting to happen again with the British. And the British they're letting us trade, but British and this country is fighting each other. Napoleonic War. Who's the other country the British are fighting? French. All right. So you got the British and French fighting each other. Like I said, we were trading with the French. So the British put a blockade where we could not ship over anything to the French to help them. And it might not have been to anything military-wise. It was just goods. But they stopped it. Well, we started getting upset about it. Another reason, we thought that some of the territories in Canada wanted to be liberated from the British. Well, we did it. Why can't they do it? So that's another reason that lays up to the War of 1812. Third thing, got these boats going across the ocean. British have a big navy. They capture our boats. They just look at them as just, they did this with pretty much anybody they captured, would force them into the British Navy. A lot of the sailors that were in the American sailboats were Irish descendants, so they figured, well, you're Irish, you're still part of the English Empire and the Crown, now you're going to be with us. Well, that didn't fly. We started having a lot of problems. Says, well, why are you doing this? We got our independence. We need you to let go of our seamen, let them come back. No. So we started having difficulty. The War of 1812 was a military conflict lasting 2.5 years, fought by the United States of America against the United Kingdom of Britain and Ireland, North American colonies, and its Native American allies, seen by the United States as Canada as war in own right. It frequently seen Europe as threatened as Napoleonic Wars, as it was caused by issue related to the war. So, a lot of it because what was going on in Europe, they were taking it on us. They're like, well, they're still a small country, they can't survive, so we'll just take it out on them. The war resolved many issues and remained by the American Revolution, but was involved no boundary changes. The United States declared war on June 18th, 1812. All right. So they declared war on England. But before that, there was a Prime Minister of England, Prime Minister of Liverpool, and they had an agreement. They actually were going to sit, but it took so long to get info from England back to the United States. There was a problem getting the info to them. This would be the first war we ever declared war against Britain. So the Prime Minister of Liverpool was trying to work this out. We could figure a way for no fighting. Well, Prime Minister of Liverpool dies. The new Prime Minister comes in. He's not having any of it. He does finally come to the United States, and we hand them declaration of war against the British. Several reasons, including the trade restrictions brought about the British war with France, the impressment of the U.S. merchant sailors and the Royal Navy, the British support of Native American tribes against Europe, American expansion, outraged over insults to the nation, honoring after humilities at high seas, and possibly U.S. interest in annexing the British territory, modern-day Canada. Okay, the British kept on, not secretly, but they were helping a lot of the Native American tribes, especially up on the East Coast, what is today Michigan, to kind of make the white man who was going through Kentucky, Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, very hard for them. And they were killing them and burning their houses. They didn't want them to go. And if you caught an Indian, or you see an Indian that's been killed, more than likely he's probably got some kind of British musket. So they started, well, okay, that was kind of, wait a minute. Okay, the war was fought in three principal theaters. First at sea with warships. So now we didn't really have a warship battle in the Revolutionary War because we really didn't have a navy. But now we're starting to build the navy up. And we'll talk about the Battle of Lake Erie and so on. Then we had our regular attacks up on the East Coast and on the Great Lakes, St. Lawrence River, the Gulf Coast, and then we had our battles that were in the Carolina, or Alabama, New Orleans, Washington. With the majority of its land, naval forces tied down in Europe, fighting the Napoleonic Wars, the British used a defensive strategy and prevents of Upper and Lower Canada. Okay, so like we said in the American Revolution, they were coming out of Canada, taking over. Because they were spread so thin, they could only come and hit the coastline to take over cities. So when we take over the cities, so you start seeing a lot of the coastal cities starting to take over. Boston, Washington, D.C. So after we've already declared war, really upset, the British comes into Washington, D.C. It's the only time in American history that the White House was destroyed by an army. It was burnt down. At the White House, they still have a part of the White House they do not paint. It's still charcoal, where it was actually burnt. So, you ever see they have a picture on the internet, you can see that. So, Dolly Madison and James Madison hear about it. They're trying to get everything out, and eventually they're going to move farther inland, and eventually move to Philadelphia. Well, while the British are in Washington, D.C., tearing everything up, a hurricane tornado hits. And what's the chances of two major storms hitting the same time as the British are in town? Now, the Capitol building's not built yet, as we know it today. The Library of Congress wasn't there. They were getting ready to start it a little bit later. So, when the British are in there, and the wind's blowing up with the rain and everything, they have to evacuate Washington, D.C. And actually, the winds were so strong, it would pick up a 1-ton cannon and toss it like a limb. So, but with that storm, because how hard it rained, it actually it actually put out the fire in the White House. So getting back to the Dolly Madison and James Madison, they left, but there was one picture. Everybody always hears this story about this one picture that's in the White House. Does anybody know this story? Okay, who was the first president of the United States again? George Washington. Okay. You see in the George Washington picture, the famous one, it's a painting of him. Okay, that was hanging in the White House. The story is Dolly Madison took it off the wall, and when they left, she took it with them. That's not true. What happened was a French servant, butler, who was on the staff, actually took it off the wall, took it and hid it until they actually moved back to Washington, D.C. So everybody always hear the story of Dolly Madison taking it, which most of the adults have probably heard that, but eventually they came out that that was not true. So, all right. So now there's some famous people in there, and you're going to hear about one general takes care of. Well, you had your regular army and your militia again, but we realized when we go to Canada, we figured we'll just send militia up there and they'll take over Canada. We'll make you part of the United States. Well, it didn't work out. British came in and they just took over, and they just started pushing us back, and we were getting beat pretty bad. This is militia soldiers. These are not everyday soldiers. So these are guys who were working farmers or worked in a factory or things like that. And then they were sent up there, and they just kept on getting, so they kept on losing. And they kept on going back. So they were like, we got to finally have a good army now. That's if you're going to be a good country. If you're going to be in a good country and be strong, you got to have a good army, not just fought with militia all the time. So they keep on getting pushed back. The British keep on going in farther inland, but they realize if we get too far, we can't get our supplies. So they would only go so far, then they would fall back and hold a position. Okay. One of the famous people from the 1812 is Andrew Jackson. Eventually becomes a president, but we'll talk about one of the major battles that he was at. And also you'll find out that his love of Native Americans wasn't so well either. We'll learn that the next class also. But, so now we're fighting, and we're like, we got to get the military together. So all the regulars from the Revolutionary War, soldiers, they've had some military experience, but they started coming together and actually becoming an army now to fight the British. But you couldn't still go head-to-head against the British because they were better trained, better equipped. So what you did was a lot of urban warfare fighting, guerrilla war fighting, where 6 guys would line up. I need 6 of you to line up right here in front, facing the crowd. Okay. So, you remember the process of firing the musket? 12 steps? Alright. Put your musket out in front of you. Stand in line, need a straight line. Alright. Reach in your cartridge box. Take 1 round out. Tear it. Pour the powder. Now you got the ball. Push the ball down. Spring rammer. Ram charge. Return rammer. Go to half cocked. Now you're ready to fire. Alright? So now the British is doing that. So they're quicker. They're going to be firing at you. The way we figure how we could beat them is when you hear, you go, ready. Cross your feet. Aim. Fire. Boom. Now, you'll get on your horses or you'll run. You never stand and fight against the British because they will outbeat you every time. You guys can sit down now. So they started figuring how to do that. And it actually started working. Okay, the British invade and occupy eastern Maine and in the deep south. So General Jackson was sent down to the deep south, and one of the major battles that he was in was Muskogee Creek and the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. Now these were against the Indians. Okay, and they were the Indians that were living down there, and he also had Indians helping him. But he wasn't really too fond of them. He liked their fighting style, but they wouldn't listen to him. So he goes down there and he pretty much, he really does, he hurts. Could you please not do that in class? All right. So now, Jackson's probably one of the first generals to actually do a Indian War style fighting, but he still, like I said, he doesn't care for the Indians, but he beats the Indians down there and beats them pretty bad. Well, the British are down there. Like I said, they've already invaded some of the south. Eventually, they go to New Orleans. Battle of New Orleans happens. So Jackson's there, and he's got volunteers from Tennessee, Kentucky, regular soldiers. He's got Indians, freed black men. He's even got pirates helping him. So now he has this battle with the British. And the British was the 42nd Highlanders, a Scottish unit. They were all wearing kilts going in the battle. And that was the first time that we actually faced the British kind of head on to win this battle. Now, the reason we won that battle, we were in a defensive position in New Orleans. So we had bales of cotton, any wood planks, so we were building it up. And when the British was coming across the field, we also had artillery. Their artillery was stuck, so they couldn't be used. So we could shoot at them when they were coming across this big empty field. So they were standing back there firing. The Scottish brigade actually took very heavy casualties, and they pretty much could not take it over. And after that, things started swaying back to the American side. Okay, we were talking about the Northwest Territory, the modern state of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin, the battleground conflict between the Indian nations and the United States. So, in this area, they were fighting the Indians. The British Empire had seceded the area of the United States, the Treaty of Paris in 1783. Both sides, the fact the land was already inhabited by various Indian nations. The Miami, Shawnee, Fox, Sauk, Kickapoo, Delaware, and Wyandotte. So, some of the warriors who left their nations for origin, the Shawnees, the brother of one of the brothers of Tecumseh, went and fought for the British. So they wound up having a lot up here. There was a famous battle in the state of Ohio. It was a land battle in Fort Meeks, up in Toledo. And the fort's still there. If you get a chance, go up there too. And what happened was the Indians attacked with a small British force, but the British had a cannon that worked better than what we had. We had such a small garrison at that fort, we lost it. Men from Germantown would ride or march all the way to Toledo. Now, if you follow the path from when they left from here, there's always a one-day march. There's usually a fort you can get to. So, Fort St. Clair is one. Greenville, Ohio, there was a fort there. And then so on all the way up, you could go, and then eventually you would go to Fort Meeks. That's how you transported your soldiers, transported your food, supplies, things like that. Which is kind of like our first highway system. All right, does anybody have any questions so far?
Talking about the transportation system and the horses, and you said Ohio was nothing but trees at that point in time. What was the big problem for those guys in their transportation system?
Well, that was it. It took a lot of time, especially when the smaller towns started coming to clear out the trees to build homes, businesses. But eventually they figured out, well, we got to figure a transit system to move soldiers, move supplies from one city to another. And eventually in history you'll see that with other roads going into major cities and stuff. So it would take time for them to cut down. There was things called corduroy roads, which is cutting a tree down, splitting it in half, and putting it on the ground. Now, when you stomp on it all the time with wagons and horses, it's going to sink. So you have to repair it. But that was one way fast to get across the area. So it did take some time. But eventually the road became a natural road. You can see the ruts in it where everything's going back and forth, back and forth. On the map, if you look at State Route 127, from Hamilton all the way north, that was a main route they took. It goes through Preble County, Butler County, wherever Greenville's in, and so on. It goes all the way up to the lake. So that was their transit system of transportation. But they did have to do a lot of work to get the trees out of the way, which the settlers didn't mind because that was a lot of work, and they actually had lumber to build their homes and so on. Okay, on June 1st of 1812, President Madison sent a message to Congress recording American grievance against Great Britain, thought not as special, or calling it the declaration of war. So with everything going on, he's like, we got to declare war and show we're a country, we're not going to put up with this and everything. And like I told you earlier, they were trying to come to an agreement. Prime Minister Liverpool died. The next one came over here, and they already had it ready to go. I have a picture of what the White House looked like, and I'm going to pass this around. This White House doesn't look like anything what it looks like today. Has anybody been to the Capitol building or the state Capitol building in Columbus? Okay, big rotunda. They have the big paintings on the wall. What's one of the big paintings here from the 1812 war? Battle of Lake Erie with Perry. Okay, so we were building the ships on the coastline up on the lakes, and we actually had a big ship that was actually doing fairly well against the British. And they were firing and having battles on the St. Lawrence River, on the Battle of Lake Erie. Well, eventually, the ship that Perry was on kind of met its match. British boat was twice its size with more cannon. So they fought for about an hour, a little over an hour. Eventually, that boat went down. Perry got on a smaller boat, and usually you always hear about a captain going down with his ship. Well, he didn't go down with the ship, but he said, I will fight for another day. And he did. He came back and fought and actually beat that ship toward the end of the war with another vessel, because by that time we had 3 boats that was helping. The French eventually helped us, kind of snuck it in for us with some better cannons that were stronger than what the British had. And we kind of caught the British surprise that night. And the next morning we were right there on them, and we destroyed the British ship. So the survivors had to go and get on their little boats and had to go back to Canada to lick their wounds. So that's the Battle of Lake Erie. They did a great job up there. So now all Lake Erie is run by the United States. And now eventually we start moving up St. Lawrence River, and we start hurting the British. The British now can't get supplies in on St. Lawrence River, which goes up through New York and everything. So now they got to go from the very top of the Canada go all the way down with supplies. Then they got to find a way to get them down to their troops that's in the United States. So you start seeing a problem there. You got to remember now, the British is fighting the French too. So that's why the numbers of the British being here in the United States was smaller than what they were in the American Revolution. And they were good soldiers, but they just could not keep on resupplying and everything. And it was a difficulty for them to get new men to replace the ones they're losing. All right. War of 1812, like I said, it didn't last that long, but we was a major conflict. It finally showed the British that no matter how much damage you could do, shows you a country can actually revolt against you and purge and get their independence. So we already had our independence, and we just forced them that you understand what we're fighting for, what we're doing here, and we will be recognized as not a colony, as the United States of America. Okay, also with Washington D.C. was not given its name yet. Does anybody know what the name was during that time? And it didn't change till after the Civil War. It was Washington City. They called it Washington City. So it wasn't District of Columbia yet until a lot later, so it was Washington City. And you'll see that through a lot of the old archives. Does anybody have a question about 1812?
You mentioned a little bit about the Native Americans around here, like the Delawares, the Shawnee, can you go a little bit further into, a little bit more about these tribes around here and what their roles were when the soldiers were going through to go to Fort St. Clair or going?
Well, there's one of the stories is, and it's kind of a tall tale. We don't know how accurate this is. And there was a massacre over on the other side of Madison, Ohio, off of 127 area, and that was the main route. And the Indians were surprise attacked them, and they were good at that. And they scalped them and everything. Well, that really ruled the Ohio troops, especially. These are their own people. But there was only when I counted, there was 10 Indian tribes that were favoring toward the British. Why not? The British is giving you food, giving you rum, which Indians like they're drinking, giving them weapons, giving them plates, silverware, anything they couldn't make, the British was giving them. That's great. But with the American side, there was ones that were actually real close allies with us. And a lot of them were the Indians out in the South, which everybody thinks, well, all the Indians were. But like I said, the ones up on the East Coast, the ones who live in this area, Shawnees, Wyandots, all of them, they didn't want the Americans to keep on moving west. But the ones in the South, we told them pretty much, look, whatever happens, you'll still have your land. Yes, we will move in, but we will still be peaceful with you. We will trade with you. We will treat you as an equal. And a lot of the tribes got together and said, not a bad idea. Now, they're still taking a chance if it doesn't work out. Because now they're going to be considered, well, if they lose, what's going to happen to us? So they took a chance. But there was 10 that would join the British side, and only 3 tribes actually joined the American side. Now, later, if you look at a lot of the tribes that were fighting this in the Revolutionary War and the 1812, a lot of them wind up they kind of died out. Their tribes did, or they kind of combined with another tribe. So you'll start seeing names that you don't see anymore. I've got some artifacts here from 1812. This is an 1812 militia sword. French-British design. They both had pretty much the same. Ivory handle. And this is to give commands on the field. Okay, when you got cannons and rifles going off and people hollering and horses going crazy, you can't usually hear. So you would use this sword to give commands on the field. It's real lightweight. So you go forward, march, hold the company, right wheel, left wheel. So you give all the commands with the sword. When the class is over, I'll let you come over here and look at this.
So it wasn't actually used as a weapon?
No, this is real dull. Most people, when they think of swords, are like, yeah, pointy and everything. Well, it's point the direction you want the soldiers to go to. Now, the cavalry had a sword that's curved. And that was when you come down, you're not cutting down to hit them to kill them automatically. You're there to break their collarbone, head wound, to knock them out, to get them out of from fighting. So that was the reason you'll start seeing a straight blade, which are your command officers' straight blades, but the cavalry and artillery would have used a curved blade, and that was more for your fighting. But actually, less than 5% of your battles from the Revolutionary War to the Civil War was actually hand-to-hand combat with swords. And eventually, when we get to the Civil War, I will explain why. And you'll probably figure it out too. This is a reproduction of a pistol that would have been used. Flintlock pistol. How you load this? How'd you load a rifle? Stand up. You too. You too. Come on. Okay, how'd you load a rifle? Okay, well, you got a part right. Reach in the box, get a round out, tear it, pour it, push the ball down, take the rammer, ram the charge. Look, I'm being nice, okay? Listen. Ram the charge, return the rammer, go to half cocked, put the pan, flash pan down for protection to keep your powder in there. After you load or after you put powder in it, then go to full cock with your hammer. Yeah, now you're ready. You load it the same way with this pistol. Now you only got one shot. So you can sit down now. That's your rammer. Okay, put it back. Put powder in there. Now it's ready to fire. So when the flint hits this part here, causes the spark to get into where the powder is in the pan, into the barrel to make it fire. Okay. Only officers might carry this, or dragoons, which would be eventually called cavalry, would use these. A regular soldier wouldn't be carrying one of these. He'd be carrying a rifle or a musket.
How many yards could it shoot, or does the ball move around?
Ball's moving around. Yeah, I maybe be able to hit that stand-it cutout. Maybe. But that's as long as there's no wind. So it was actually, you got close enough, boom, you would fire and hit them. Anybody else have a question?
You were talking about how it would be bouncing around. How inaccurate would it be? Would it be off by like 2 feet, or would it be more off like?
It's
5
hard to
inches?
say. When it's like, that's the reason you stand shoulder to shoulder, so you're hoping to hit what you're trying to hit.
Anything.
anything. That's all you're trying to do is hit anything. But your musket might be going up, down, sideways. It's just hard to say because when it's fired, it's moving like this. So when it comes out, it's still moving. So if the wind's blowing, or someone steps in front of it, you might hit them in the leg, chest, arm.
Weird places.
You can hit them anywhere if you don't know where it's going to hit them at. I can aim and try to hit them in the chest, but I say from here, more likely I probably hit him in the shoulder.
Which would work better, the musket or the pistol?
Musket was a little bit farther. You can shoot a little bit farther. Now, unless you had a Pennsylvania rifle or a Kentucky rifle, which was longer, the bullet or the barrel was octagon. So when it was actually, and you made your own bullets, and so it actually now it's kind of got a groove to kind of shoot. So it's like football. When you throw a great spiral, it goes farther, right? Okay. You throw a football and you don't get a good spiral, it's all wobbly. Well, that's how you tell the difference between a rifled gun and a smoothbore gun.
So at this point, would they be most likely still trapping for their food, and are they?
Yeah, out in this area, I would say so. You know, in bigger cities, you had your farmers that were bringing in the.
Well, right, but I mean, like as far as shooting deer and are they mainly trapping for their pelts and their?
They're getting away from it. They're using it to sell.
Okay.
I mean, you'll see people still using buckskin, still, and furs for hats and coats and things like that. But through history, you will tell how the clothes will change. Women liked, and during the 1812 Revolutionary War, women liked a lot of silk, so it was easy to get a hold of. You had your cotton. You had sheer, real lightweight. But the men were still using their cotton, canvas, wool uniforms and clothes, everyday clothes. So, unless you lived out in the wild frontier, which this is still considered the wild frontier, you still could find people wearing buckskins and things like that. Now, the women, they were probably wearing cotton clothes and things, and sheer was real expensive. Unless you had money, that was why you got that. But wool was usually your main clothes to wear back then, because it was just easier to produce. It came in a bolt. You just cut out with the design and everything. Any other questions?
You talked about how they learned how to fight, or the states were learning how to fight better against the British, smarter. I mean, how come it took them so long? Why
Well,
did they
there's
stand
a
shoulder to shoulder in the Revolutionary War and I don't understand it.
well, there's a great thing called Napoleonic War and the Napoleonic tactics. Every officer who goes to West Point or school in England, that's the style of fighting. That is a manly style of fighting. I want to stand shoulder to shoulder and face the enemy. Us standing, firing, and running, that's a cowardly way. So they're cowards. They never give them respect. Especially with the militia units, the ones who would go and fight, get on their horses, run away, but then they might hit them half hour later somewhere else down the road. But you did more damage to them because you never knew when you were going to get hit. When you're at one battle where everybody's standing shoulder to shoulder, then you know after that battle, you can lick your wounds and go on to the next city or the next town. But that was it was a tactic. How many men can I throw on the field to be overpowering?
They had rules of war too, right?
They did have rules of war.
Didn't shoot officers.
Okay, the British was the one that usually said don't shoot our officers, because in the British Army, the running joke is you can never lead. The British soldiers will never know what to do if his officer's hit, because the officer tells him what to do all the time. Load, firing, right wheel, left wheel, move wherever you need to go. So Americans said, okay, we won't do that. Other thing that was off limits was no sharpshooters. And when I say sharpshooters, a guy who's with a Kentucky long rifle could sit back for 200 yards and pick off the guy, just like hunting. Pick him off. Did it happen? Yes. Did they not like it? Yeah, pretty much. But that's war. You have your rules, but pretty much rules are thrown out in war.
Were they taking prisoners at all?
They were taking prisoners. Okay, we talked about the prisoner being on the boats, being pushed to the British Navy. Okay. A famous gentleman was a prisoner of war on a naval ship in this harbor. So this is a question for next week. Okay, so listen. This name of this fort is in the Baltimore Harbor. This gentleman, on his name and the name of this fort, he seen a flag still standing, and he made a song for this, and we used the song today. So that's what I want you to come back next week and tell me. The name of the guy who wrote it, and the name of the fort that he's seen the flag still standing.
How small will the ball be for that? Like a BB size?
No.
How big?
This is about a 69 caliber, so like this. It's one lead ball. It's one lead ball that's coming after you. Now, they had a cool one's called bucking ball, which is like a big giant shotgun. So you got one of these with 3 little BBs on top. So if this hits you, then you're going to have little pellets everywhere else in you.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
It's going to hit you and it's going to hurt more. So now it's going to take longer to get them out of your body.
It would be easier if they made balls that had pellets all around them.
It would, but that was not how all the guns were.
How do calibers and millimeters and everything in guns work?
It's the dimensions of the barrel. When you run the barrel through how they make them, they actually have a ruler they'll put in there, and it's a metal piece that you can actually put in, and it'll tell you what the diameter of the meter, caliber, things like that.
Did they use duck foot pistols then?
Not yet. A little bit later. We're still at flintlocks. The next war, we will get into flintlocks to percussions.
Okay.
So even after the British were losing, knew that they were losing, they still didn't change how they would line up.
Nope.
So they'd rather take a defeat and be armed.
Yep. They worked for them. But they would also, if you did it that way and would change, other countries would have seen that. Now, later, after the 1812's over with, the British continued to fight that way all the way up till 1870s, 1880s. And their guns were better. Why? The honorable thing to do. It's the British thing. I have never understood that. But if you talk to anyone who's a tactician or statistician or who went to a military school, or even in the military, they will understand, standing shoulder to shoulder makes no sense. Your casualty rate goes up, you're wasting ammo, at least when you got a little bit shorter distance, you hit them, you can run back, hit them again later. Especially when you don't have a big number-wise. But the British did that. Well, British did it, the French did it, we did it till the 1860s. So that was just the Napoleonic way of fighting, and it never really changed until late 1860 and on. They started figuring out, let's not do that. But we got away from it, and during World War I, you'll see it again, kinda. And the other gentleman who will be doing World War I, he'll kind of explain that. Anybody else have a question?
I have one too.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but sometimes I'm slow about doing something. So in the Revolutionary War, we were being supported by the French and the Spanish and the Germans. Is that what you
Yeah,
said?
kinda, yeah.
Why did the German, why did you have you had Germans in the British army? Why were they on both sides?
Well, you gotta remember in 1730s, 1740s, a lot of the Germans were being pushed out of that area because of religion reasons. They would go to England, still being treated awful, go from England to the United States. So now we are considered not a free country, but a country that I can have any religion I want. And there was the Hessians who would stayed and fought with the British, but they were always promised something. When the war's over, we will give you land and let you do whatever you want. But the British at that time always tell the Indians the same thing. Eventually, you're going to have problems with that. There's only so much land. And if you don't believe what they believe in, they're going to force their way on you. And they wanted a lot of them to change over from their, would have been Catholic Protestants that were in Germany. They wanted them to be the Church of England. They wanted them to be whatever the king tells them to do. So that was the main problem. And then you'll start seeing the people come here. Now it says, okay, we can move away from the bigger cities, like in Pennsylvania, the Dutch, which are German, who are the Amish. They have their own religion. That was the reason they were being pushed out. Same reason. Now, they were peaceful people. They didn't fight. But the ones who were not Amish, who were German, who went to those areas, started their own communities, more likely they would have favored the continental side through the 1812 and Revolutionary War. Because they're like, I don't want to be ruled like I've been ruled in the other country and being kicked out. The Irish was another hand that, same thing, but when the British go up to Ireland and pretty much force you to do whatever they say, they didn't like it. And that was reasons in the 1830s, 40s, 50s, you start seeing more Irish immigrants coming to the United States because now they can believe in any religion they want to believe in. And religion was very important back then. You got to understand, from the Revolutionary War to pretty much the Civil War, religion was so important in this country. It didn't matter what you were. Someone might not like it, which we still do today, but it was so important for your stance, and you would believe in that, and you stood by that. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, so it wasn't really the country that was supporting it.
No, it wasn't the country, it was the immigrants from those areas. Now,
Yeah.
Germany, they said they helped by their name, and all they did was really give money to the Americans under the table, but they couldn't say that we're helping you exactly because the British would have probably invaded them from other colonies. Do you have a question?
What were the beliefs? Like how many Catholics and how many Christians?
Well, last week I said that. I gave you the statistics of how many were in this country of all the different religions. I can't remember offhand. But there was quite a bit. Anybody else have a question? Okay, when class is over, I'll let you come down here and look at these.
I have something to share with everybody. A couple of us went to the cemetery over in Carlisle that you had is that where you had mentioned?
Mhm.
Yeah. We got a couple grave rubbings, and this one was James Tipscott, and I think Joy put on Facebook a little bit about what his cemetery plot said, that he fought in the Revolutionary War. And I just wanted to read it real quick. Are you familiar with this?
Go ahead.
Gentlemen, I wonder.
That's fine.
It says, memory of M. James Tipscott, a worthy man, his heart sincere, his counsel wise, his motives pure, in pure in disguise. His judgment sound, his conscience clear, he always loved and did appear. This pious Christian was the founder of the church that now bears his name. He died in peace November 3rd, 1815, in the 65th year of his age. So, he was a Revolutionary War gentleman who fought and then a pastor, it sounded like, so it's right over in Carlisle. I think there were a couple more here that we had seen.
The last 1812 soldier died in 1850. Yeah, 1850 was the last 1812 soldier that died. So that was kind of interesting. When I was digging, I said, I wonder how old the Rev War, the last Civil War I know. For the 1812, I didn't really know. I was wondering what the final year was, and I found it. And so you can actually look that up and kind of read what his name was.
Are you familiar with this gentleman? Someone put a new stone on his plot, but he was born in Old England.
Robert Moses Senior, born in Old England, July 16,
That's-
1735, October 9th, 1832 is his death.
Yeah, it's neat to read when you say Old England, because you got to remember that was the first generations that were coming here. So they were born in England, came here. Like I said before last week, you got to remember you guys were the first generations of fighting the Revolution to move on. Eventually, the 1812. So we're pretty much done for right now. If anybody has any last questions, feel free to ask me right now.
General Ferguson, or
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The question last week. Who has the name? Who is the officer that was there, and what was the name of the battle?
Major Patrick Ferguson, Battle of Kings Mountain.
Okay, very good. So what's the question you got to look up for next week?
Who wrote the anthem and was it what fort was the flag flying up?
Very good. So next week come back and we'll do that. Next week will be the Texas Revolution and the Mexican War. So thank you very much.